YouTube? This is Braden back with another GIMP tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to be using 3 images, or actually just one image that we're going to cut up into 3 parts to sort of create an Inception effect. So it looks like the image is directly being ripped up and gravity has been reversed. You could even make this a full, if you want to go like full trippy, a full 4 sides instead of 3 sides. The same techniques apply. You could definitely do that. You would have to do a little more blending. But yeah, it's great. It's a very versatile technique as well. When I first did the proof of concept, I wasn't really satisfied because the image I used had a lot of blending problems. Like we had to blend this, we had to blend the landscape. The image I chose actually wasn't even that good in terms of like how exactly, or the color quality of the image and the sky quality. So it's going to be better if you try to find a landscape image that has relatively clean edges that also you view from directly on, and you'll see the image I open up a little later. It has a lot of trippy applications as well. Like I was unhappy with this, but like with everything, you can just spam filters on top of it and call it like an indie album, right? Like a psychedelic indie album, and that actually looks pretty cool as well. So you can do a lot of different things branching off with this and sort of make it whatever landscape you want. It is going to be, again, easier if it's a sea or something that you can easily blend as opposed to like a cityscape. You can use a cityscape, you should just make sure that the corners that you use are going to be relatively easy to blend instead of like having to get large buildings. So stock selection is definitely an important part of this tutorial. But yeah, with that said, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I've made a new canvas that's 2000 by 2000. We want it to be a little more square than we normally make it so we can get some nice height. Let's go ahead and go File, Open as Layers, and open up the image that you're going to be using. In this case, I'm using this image I found on Pexels. The link will, of course, as always, be in the description. So go ahead and grab your Scale tool by hitting Shift-T or clicking the Scale tool icon over in the board, and we'll go ahead and scale this down quite a bit. We want the image to be about the same size in terms of width as the image over here. So I think that that's looking a little bit, it's maybe a little big. Let's just scale it down a tiny bit more and call that good. Okay, perfect. So we don't want too much beach in here. Now we need to come up with sort of the general corridor like layout. We need to make ourselves sort of a virtual room so we can imagine how we're going to make this 3D. So grab your square tool and let's make a square selection about like this. And then we'll go ahead and fill that in with the fill bucket tool. Make sure you are on fill whole selection with this layer selected, and let's go ahead and just fill it in with whatever color. It doesn't matter, we're just using it for selection purposes. Then the layer size is quite large right now, so let's go Layer, Auto Crop Layer, and the reason we're doing this is because now we're going to be using the alignment tool, clicking on this layer, and we'll click right here to align that exactly in the center of the image. And if we didn't scale the layer before, then it would not have aligned properly. Let's just make sure we got this perfectly lined up. Yeah, okay. We want the person in the middle to be more or less in the center. This tree might pose problems, but we can edit that out as well. Okay, so now we're going to grab our Paths tool, which is right here. You can use the shortcut B for that as well. And we'll make a path from the corner of this square right here all the way down so it comes off the canvas perfectly just like that. And go ahead and select it, press Enter to make a selection, then Command-Shift-N to make a new layer right on top of here. Get your paint bucket tool again, and let's fill this in with a slightly different color, about like that. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this layer, and then grab your flip tool, which is located right here, and we're going to flip this horizontally. And if you had done it correctly, and we have done it correctly, then it should automatically flip over to the exact other size of the image. So now you can see it's sort of coming together, right? Like these are where the 2 walls are going to be, and this is where the open air is going to be. But just so we can get a better view, let's go ahead and reduce the opacity of all of these down to around 45. And then go ahead and alpha to selection this and delete these 2 layers right here. So now we have a perfect guideline of sort of where we want to be. Next, we need to make sure that the horizon line is right on the border of the blue square, so something like this. And I'm going to try to position it such that the person sitting on the beach is right in the middle of the composition, so something like that. Next, let's go ahead and duplicate this layer twice. Go ahead and hide one, and then hit Shift R for your rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate this at an angle of 90 degrees. And you can see that this is going to be the wall that we're using for the beach. And so I'll reduce the opacity, and we want to make sure that the horizon lines up here more or less exactly with the sort of corridor that we're creating. And I'm going to try to move, where possible, the tree out of the image, because that will just uncomplicate things. So I think something like that is looking pretty good, and if we want to see how this actually looks, then we can go ahead and alpha to selection the guide layer that we made before, hit Command I to invert the selection, and then we can delete the rest of the selection, and then Control Shift A to get rid of your selection entirely. So now if we hide this layer and turn the opacity of this layer all the way up, you can sort of see the effect that we're going for. Of course, there are still a lot of blending issues, and you can obviously see it's the same image just repeated over again, but we'll fix that later in the tutorial. So now we're going to do the same thing with the other side, so go ahead and unhide that second layer you made, grab your rotate tool one more time, Shift R, and rotate it by -90 degrees. And then let's go ahead and move it more or less into position, except I'm going to be going as far up as I can, because again, I really want to avoid that tree, because I think it'll look much better if we get that out of the way. So move it up to where the horizon matches right around on the blue square again. In this case, I think our beach is actually doing an excellent job of matching too, so that's good. It'll mean less work for us later. Let's go ahead and right click, alpha to selection this, invert that selection, and then delete, and then deselect, and that is again Command Shift A. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this layer and bring this layer back up to full opacity, and you can really sort of see that our effect is already taking shape. We just have to do some blending work. So the first thing we're going to fix about this image is this cutoff on the sky, because I think that that's the most obvious part. So go ahead and walk up to your layer right here, and we'll go ahead and reduce the opacity to 0 so we can see this white background of the canvas. And then grab your color picker tool, which you can access right here, or I believe the hotkey is O or P. I've changed it since, but you'll go ahead and select right there the area closest to the edge of the picture, making sure you're on that layer or with sample merge selected. And then for a background color, we're going to select that exact same color that you picked out, which should be this one right here, and then we'll just go ahead and make it a touch darker, about like that. And then grab your gradient tool, and making a new layer behind all of your other layers so far, you'll go ahead and, using the gradient FG to BG on linear, stroke up about like that. And that has substantially made it look a lot better, but of course there's still a difference because there's no noise in here. There was noise in the original photo. So in order to fix this, we'll go ahead and go Filters, Noise, HSV Noise. And I think the default settings should be strong enough. We can maybe even touch it just a touch. I think that's value. Yeah, we'll touch it up just to like 12 or something, and letting that render, and perfect. So now we're getting a much better blend. If we want to make the blend even better yet, we can go ahead and select this layer, hit Shift E for your eraser tool, select a big fuzzy brush, something like this, and then just very, very gently along the problem spots that you see right here, go ahead and erase some of the sky. Perfect. And that's about as clean of a blend on the sky as I think that we're going to get. It typically looks quite cool if you have objects or people walking on the beach over here, because they are now defying gravity. So it's possible that if you wanted to get rid of these copies of these people like I do, you could instead choose to leave the copy of the person on the side of the wall. However, since I've chosen this person to be in the center of the entire composition, I don't think I'm going to leave the people on the side of the wall. So in order to remove those, we're going to be using a pretty cool technique that's very similar to Photoshop's content-aware fill, if you guys are familiar with that. And to do that, let's first go ahead and grab the free select tool and zoom in, and make sure that the layer you're selected on is the layer that is the current side you're on. So in this case, I'm on my left side layer. Now let's go ahead and just make a selection around everything that you don't want. And it doesn't have to be a great quality selection, but do make sure you get everything that you want removed inside of the selection. That is to say, don't cut off a corner of the backpack trying to get too close. It's better to be too large than it is too close. So we have a selection like that, and then we'll go ahead and go select sharpen, and that'll get rid of any aliasing issues, which you'll see in a second. And it might be wise to duplicate this layer as well, just to save your work. But then go ahead and on this layer, without making a new layer, go ahead and fill it in with the reddest possible red you can select in Gimp, and that is important. That means drag all the way up and drag all the way up to where you get FF0000, and then fill that in with red, and then go ahead and get rid of your selection. And then we're going to be going filters, GMIC, not sure how you say that, and we'll go ahead and go to available filters, repair, in-paint patch based, and you can adjust with these settings. Don't believe anyone that tells you they actually know what these settings do. They're either a developer, or I guess they're maybe just that good, but I don't know anyone that like can adjust these like based on the image and just know how it's going to look. Basically, yeah, lookup factor, it means like how far away it can look, and lookup size means like what kind of chunks it's taking. But even still, just go with the default settings at first, and more often than not, that'll give you like a relatively satisfactory result. Of course, we can still see some like digital artifacting and stuff going on, so in order to fix that, you can go ahead and grab your heal tool, which is this icon right here, the bandage icon, and you hold command on the heal tool, which takes a selection from the image, and then as you are painting over it, it draws from the image data of where you have selected. So it's a good idea to continue to make selections in areas near and areas that work with the area that you're doing. So something like that I think actually looks pretty good. We've lost a little bit of the hard edge of the beach, but I can't imagine that it's going to be too noticeable from a large distance away. Yeah, we've pretty much basically successfully removed that. So I'm going to go and do that exact same process with other foreign objects that I don't want, but we'll go on to, and I'll like spend more time on like more complicated objects to remove that might be a little tricky for you guys. So I'll just like do a few, and I'll be right back. So I got rid of some of the most obvious spots, but we still have some glaring flaws with the image, especially this area right here. This is probably the biggest killer of the illusion, as it were. And you could try to do this with the same fill technique that we used before, but you probably wouldn't have a lot of luck because it's hard for Gimp to differentiate between the water and the sand. In addition, you kind of need a straight line right here, so we're going to have to fix this manually. And we can do that by go ahead and duplicating this layer. And we'll go ahead and reduce the opacity of this layer down a little bit too, so we can sort of see where we're moving it. And we want to move it so that the beach lines up with the other beach, right around here. Maybe increase the opacity just a touch, see where we're at, something like that. Yeah, that should work splendidly. Okay, so now that we have that, we'll go ahead and alpha to selection this. And then on this top layer right here, grab your eraser with Shift E, and then Command I to invert the selection, and then erase everything that we went over. So like that. So we still preserve that nice angle that we worked really hard to create. And we can go ahead and get rid of that right now. You can keep it like that, or if you want the white of the water, because as you can see we've lost a lot of the detail in the waves by shifting it over and erasing that. You can optionally choose to erase some of this water right here if you want to keep that white, but actually I tend to like it without the white because it makes it look a lot more realistic and a lot less symmetrical, like it actually is a landscape that we folded up. The final glaring flaw right here is this little area right here. So what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to, instead of erasing this, you could erase it, I think I'm going to try to extend this a little bit. In addition, I'm going to keep this tree here and erase this tree here. So again, you can do that with the same content tool that we used before, or the Gimp that we used before. So I took out that bush, and then I also just literally took the paintbrush tool and then just sort of doodled an end to this stump so it didn't look like it ended quite so abruptly. We still have a few rough spots in our image, however, especially if you used a Gimp filter and you found that you sort of got a pretty bad result because it pulled some information from the water and tried to mix it with the sand, sort of like we went before. sort of like I warned about before, you can go ahead and grab your heal tool one more time and select this layer. Oops. Heal tool. Hold. Let's get a little bit bigger of a brush. Not that big. And again, hold Control and oops, that's still too big. And just sort of try to do what you can. You do have to be careful with the heal brush, because if I, for instance, sample over here and then continue to heal, it'll pull the information from areas that I don't want information to be pulled from. So I'm just going to go right on over here, maybe select some darker sand over here. And get this all sorted out, and then maybe you can get some water, and you do want to keep on sampling new areas, because if you don't keep on sampling new areas, the entire area will start to look rather samey, and of course we want to avoid that. Okay. So that's obviously not perfect. You can tell that something was taken out, but it looks much better than it did just with using the Gimp filter. Yeah, I should also probably take this out, and I'll do that later. But we want to maybe keep this shadow, and we want to extend this shadow onto the other side of the beach, because right now, again, that's one of our hard cutoff points. So let's go ahead and make a new layer right on top of this, and sample that exact same color, and then grab your paintbrush tool, and which goes right here. And let's go ahead and just very roughly continue this shadow. Sort of at a 90-degree angle. Try your best. Let's go. Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah, and then I'll go ahead and blur this a little bit with a Gaussian blur. And let's see, preview. That's fine. And no, the opacity is actually, it's quite a strong effect. So move tool, and let's move that down about like that. So yeah, the last really bad area that we have right now is this bush, and I'll go ahead and edit that out and be right. Okay, now the very last thing that we need to do is just catch any last little bits that still don't look perfect and go into the image. Fortunately, with this image, we ended up with a very, very smooth transition from water to water, because we used that landscape image like I was talking about. So we'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit, and so there aren't really too many parts of the water that don't, or that look out of place. One thing that we can do if we want to make it a little better is grab the clone tool, and I use the clone tool a little bit over here to patch up this area when the heal tool isn't quite strong enough. The clone tool just like literally clones like exactly stamps. So we'll grab this stamp tool right here, and we'll go ahead and reduce the brush size a little bit, and go ahead and sample from the white water over here, and make sure you're above the layer, of course. Sample from the white, we will actually need to merge these layers, I think, if we want to use them. Yeah, we definitely will. No, we won't, never mind. You just sample while you're selected on one layer, and then go ahead and make sure you're on top of that layer. So I'm just going to drag some white water right like that. And then you can also do the same over here. There we go. That's looking really good. And then over here we can maybe fix some of these issues. So you will have to juggle layers. It might actually be simpler just to go ahead and merge everything down. But we won't do that quite yet. Make sure that lines up all the way. Something like that. And then we want to get this white part over here. So yeah, let's go ahead and just merge these layers down, because I think it'll be quite a bit easier if we end up doing that, instead of having to bounce from layer to layer and make sure that we're on top all the time. So merge that down. Now we should be able to clone directly. And you do need to be careful when cloning from a vertical source to a horizontal source. Oops. yeah, just try to be careful that you don't clone too terrible much, because then of course it will look pretty bad. So something like this. And again, yeah, it helps to clone directly from the source. We'll clone a little bit over here, make sure this water is looking nice and proper. Oops. And maybe over here we can work on this corner a little bit more and really try to make it look like that water is flowing directly up. And over here we could grab a little bit of this darkness. Or maybe you just grab it from over here, and yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. And grab some of this. And again, a lot of this is just going to be like experimentation, trying to find out what looks the best. And you can even make like little swooping motions as well, to make it look like there's a very slight curvature on the waves. And you don't want to erase the entirety of the hard border, you just want to get some areas that, oops, see I'm going way too hard there with the clone tool. Just want to get some areas that look like they're really floating up into that wall of water, because that is going to be, these little like attention to detail things you do is going to be what elevates the image from like looking, relatively decent to actually looking, really good. So we'll do that over here a little bit as well. And again, this all depends on the original image that you're using. This is all possible with the clone tool. A little bit over here. And it's really good, it's awesome actually if you can find maybe even like boats or ships or something that could be like going up here. You could even technically Photoshop a boat in if you wanted to, or Gimp boat in. What am I saying? This Gimp know-how. Yeah, you could even Gimp boat in if you wanted to. It's sort of interesting how like Photoshop has entered the like common vernacular. Like it's like Google, right? You just use it as a verb, like to edit an image. You can just Photoshop it right in. But no, of course we're gimping things right in because this is Gimp know-how. So yeah, I think that just about completes the tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. As always, like I really appreciate seeing your comments and even seeing what you guys did with this. You can always send me an email or something if you made a tutorial and want to show it. Yeah, I might even start at something with that later. We'll see. Anyway, yeah, thanks so much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in about a week.